if it happens. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Did you see the debate last night? Probably did. Too bad it was the last one. We learned a lot in an hour and a half. We always do. We learned that self-control pays off. Donald Trump pulled back a little bit on stage, and he's never been better than he was last night. You could understand what he was saying, and that helped. At the same time, we learned that if you really want to wreck Joe Biden, let him talk without a script for 2 minutes. At his age, that's like the Iron Man. It wears him right out. We also learned something that we already knew. Donald Trump drives a certain sort of person completely insane. There's nothing Trump says that doesn't frighten people like this. He could recite the words from the Happy Birthday song and they would hear machine gun fire. These are highly neurotic individuals. You get the sense many of them have severe allergies and digestive problems, so of course we're only speculating about that. In any case, it happened again last night when the president tried to explain why the human smuggling of children into the United States is a bad thing. Here's what he said.
Children are brought here by coyotes and lots of bad people, cartels, and they're brought here and they used to use them to get into our country.
So human smugglers, coyotes as they're often called along the border, bring children into this country illegally, sometimes without their parents. That's true, and that's what the president said. What a lot of prominent Trump haters heard was that huge feral canines were dragging children across the Sonoran Desert. And of course, they didn't believe a word of it. Another Trump lie! His 916th today! Darshan Kendrick is an elected Democrat in the state of Georgia. She's one of her party's leaders in the state house there. And she wasn't buying it for a second. How the hell does a coyote bring a whole human across the border? She wondered on Twitter. You should know that Darshan Kendrick is an attorney and a self-described investment advisor. So you're going to want to hand your retirement portfolio to her as soon as you can. Coyotes dragging children? Lions and tigers maybe, but coyotes? They're too small. Good point. Nothing gets past Darshan Kendrick. She's sharp. Meanwhile, a well-known student at the prestigious Harvard University near Boston had a similar objection to what the president said. He found Trump's mention of coyotes, quote, xenophobic. Why does Donald Trump never criticize American animals? Ever noticed that? It's always Mexican coyotes or Chinese pandas, but not a word about golden retrievers or Maine Coon cats. So naturally, the Harvard kid was upset because at Harvard, they know racism when they see it. So that's yet another thing we learned last night. The supposedly most impressive people in our society aren't impressive at all. They're dim, and they're silly, and they're humorless. And on some level, they know that about themselves. That's why they're so self-righteous. It's a cover. The rest of us know it too, which makes them angry. If you've ever wondered why the most privileged people in America often seem so mad, that's your answer. Because they're frauds and they know we know it. But back to the debate last night. At one point, Joe Biden told us that hundreds of these children brought here by coyotes, possibly dragged, have been separated permanently from their parents by the Trump administration, which hates families. 545 children to be exact. Now, if you believe that was true, you'd be upset about it, so you'll be happy to know it's not true. It's not even close to true. The vast majority of the parents of these children have been located by federal authorities, and they're refusing to reunite with their children. A DHS spokesperson says that in one lawsuit currently pending, the plaintiffs have been able to contact, quote, the parents of 485 children separated at the border, and yet, quote, they've yet to identify a single family that wants their child reunited with them in their country of origin. Oh, so it's more complicated than Joe Biden told us. In many cases, the parents in question are not in the United States. They're still back home at their country of origin, usually in Central America. In some cases, never even tried to come to the United States, and instead they set their children up with someone else, a coyote possibly, to bring them here. Now, you can say what you want about the choice to do that, but the evidence is clear. All the people howling about children in cages and family separations have no idea what they're talking about or don't care. And of course, they have no answers to the problems they claim are plaguing their consciences. Their solution is to let anyone with a child gain immediate access to this country. What would that do? Well, it would be flooded by millions of new people instantly. But it would, needless to say, encourage more human smuggling, a huge amount of human smuggling, which is odd since everyone pretends to be against human smuggling, but apparently not everyone is. Everyone used to pretend to be against crime, too. In the 1980s and 1990s, crime was one of the biggest issues in this country. It defined people's lives, where they lived, where they worked. It changed election results every year. Was America a more racist country back then? No, not really. There was just an awful lot of crime in the 80s and 90s. Look it up. There was a huge amount of crime, and a lot of it was driven by drugs, particularly crack cocaine. That's real. It actually happened. Ask anyone who was alive then. Joe Biden was alive then. He was a middle-aged man then. And his constituents asked him to help fix the crime problem. So just like virtually everyone else in Washington at the time, Joe Biden voted to stiffen drug penalties. That was an enormously popular thing to do in the middle of a drug epidemic and a murder epidemic that inevitably followed. It was popular with people in black neighborhoods. They were suffering the most. But now, Joe Biden, as possibly doesn't remember what happened, but it doesn't matter, now he's pretending it was all a big racist mistake. Watch.
In the 80s, we passed 100%, all 100 senators voted for it, a bill on drugs and how to deal with drugs. It was a mistake. I've been trying to change this since then, particularly the portion on cocaine. That's why I've been arguing that, in fact, we should not send anyone to jail for a pure drug offense. They should be going into treatment across the board. That's what we should be spending money on. That's why I set up drug courts, which were never funded by our Republican friends.
Now, the bill that Joe Biden just referred to passed in 1986, and it passed the United States Senate with 97 votes. He was close, not 197. That bill was co-sponsored by the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus at the time. The House approved it by a 376-vote margin. And then the Senate passed Joe Biden's 1994 crime bill, which he's also called a mistake, with an overwhelming bipartisan majority. That was a 95-4 vote, and the House approved that bill by a 40-vote margin. The majority of the Congressional Black Caucus supported it. Let's restate that. The majority of the Congressional Black Caucus supported the crime bill they're now telling us was written by the Klan. And by the way, the Republicans are saying that too, mindlessly. Joe Biden knows that these bills weren't mistakes. We don't put people in jail in this country for being black. We didn't do that in the 1980s and 90s. Sorry. People go to jail for committing crimes. Not all of our anti-crime laws are smart. Some of them are dumb. But the bill wasn't written to punish an ethnic group. It was written to control what was a very real problem, including in black neighborhoods, maybe especially. And that was drug-fueled crime. People were dying from it in big numbers in 1994. But Joe Biden no longer acknowledges that, or again, maybe he doesn't remember. Not only now is he telling us these crime bills were mistakes, now he's telling us that any law that puts any drug offender in prison is a mistake. And we're not going to have laws like that. Really? Would that include the opioid dealers who've killed hundreds of thousands of Americans in recent years? Apparently, they won't go to jail. So what's going to happen when we stop trying to punish opioid dealers and instead send them to some useless rehab program? What's the success rate in rehab programs? Does anyone ever mention that? You know anyone who's been to rehab? These people know anything? It would be nice to know before that happens what the consequences might be. But of course, no one asked last night. Instead, we were on to the next thing, global warming. Joe Biden, you won't be surprised to learn, is against global warming. He already wears a sweater a lot of the time. He thinks it's too stuffy in here as it is. But he's not against fracking. He told us that last night. If elected, he will not ban fracking. That's always been his position, always.
What about fracking?
All right,
Now
let me allow
fracking.
Vice President Biden to
I
respond.
never said I oppose fracking.
You said it on tape.
I did. Show the tape. Put it on your website.
I'll put it on.
Put it on the website. The fact of the matter is
Showed
he's
it last
flat lying.
Would there be any place for fossil fuels, including coal and fracking, in a Biden administration?
No, we would work it out. We would make sure it's eliminated.
Oh, so it's a little bit more complicated. In fact, Biden would ban fracking, we guess. In fact, he'd ban all fossil fuels at some point, but not until he's elected, so calm down. He'd also pass something called the HEROES Act. What's the HEROES Act? Well, the HEROES Act exists to help people with the coronavirus. And Republicans, needless to say, are against that because they support the coronavirus. In fact, Republicans invented the coronavirus in a lab at the Villages outside Orlando. Watch Joe Biden tell you why we need the HEROES Act right now.
You are the leader of the Democratic Party. Why have you not pushed the Democrats to get a deal for the American people?
Well, I have, and they have pushed it. Look, they passed this act all the way back in the beginning of the summer. This is like it's not new. It's been out there. This HEROES Act has been sitting there.
Oh, okay, so the HEROES Act has been sitting there. You're going about your life thinking things are kind of fine. Little did you know the HEROES Act has been sitting there. And it will, in fact, continue to sit there unless Democrats win the Senate and the White House next month. That's what Joe Biden said, at which point everything will be fine. So what exactly is the HEROES Act and what does it do? We never got into that last night. We'll tell you now. Among other things, the HEROES Act would allow illegal immigrants to retroactively receive coronavirus stimulus checks. People who are here illegally would get tax dollars retroactively. The bill contains a prison break provision allowing inmates with asthma or diabetes to get out of jail. It bans voter ID laws. Of course it does. What HEROES Act wouldn't ban voter ID laws? But the bill also allows marijuana businesses and their service providers access to banking and insurance services. They're heroes too. The bill would bail out left-wing jurisdictions that had financial problems going back many decades, long before coronavirus, long before the Republicans invented it at the Villages. And of course, the bill would allow paid political operatives to collect ballots in bundles and return them to polling stations. Ballot harvesting, but not just in California, nationally. They're heroes. The ballot harvesters are heroes, ladies and gentlemen. They're heroes. Remember them in your prayers. So consider those provisions and ask yourself, who exactly do they help? Americans who've lost their jobs because of the lockdowns? Small business owners trying to save their livelihoods? The ones Joe Biden told us, put up some plexiglass. Yeah, that works. It doesn't work, by the way, science has shown. But anyway, those people aren't the intended beneficiaries of this legislation. No. Instead, the bill helps the Democratic Party, which looks across our land and sees the destruction wrought by these lockdowns, the suicides, the depressions, the spiking overdoses, as a political opportunity for them. Last night, Joe Biden urged Americans to prepare for a dark winter. A dark winter? Be afraid, Joe Biden says. Now, be afraid has been the message of the Democratic Party for the entire year. But last night, Joe Biden made it totally explicit.
And I say we're learning to live with it. We have no choice. We can't lock ourselves up in a basement like Joe does. He has the ability to lock himself up. I don't know. He's obviously made a lot of money someplace, but he has this thing about living in a basement. People can't do that. People are losing their jobs. They're committing suicide. There's depression, alcohol, drugs at a level that nobody's ever seen before. There's abuse, tremendous abuse. We have to open our country. You know, I've said it often, the cure cannot be worse than the problem itself. And that's what's happening.
We're about to go into a dark winter, and he has no clear plan, and there's no prospect that there's going to be a vaccine available for the majority of the American people before the middle of next year. It is, if you have a reproduction rate in a community that's above a certain level, everybody says, slow up, more social distancing, do not open bars and do not open gymnasiums. Do not open until you get this under control.
So it's all about the, quote, reproduction rate. It's about the spread of the virus. But not every population is affected the same. If you have the spread of the virus in a nursing home where people are demonstrably vulnerable, that's a huge problem. If you have the spread of the virus among healthy 18-year-olds, it's not a problem. In fact, the flu is a bigger problem. The conventional annual influenza is a bigger problem. This virus has a 99.9% survival rate for the vast majority of Americans. The lockdowns, on the other hand, hurt everyone. The economic and psychological costs of them are in many cases irreversible. Thousands of businesses will never come back. The families that own those businesses are destroyed even as Google and Amazon get stronger. And what about our children? Students who have already spent a year away from school are now preparing to stay away from school indefinitely, and they're learning nothing. If you're a parent, you know that, but many studies have shown the same thing. And yet in Fairfax, Virginia, and other places, the teachers' unions want schools closed until at least August of 2021. Classes should be virtual until a proven vaccine is, quote, widely available. That's insanity. School children face almost no risk of death from this. That's not an exaggeration. But Joe Biden essentially endorsed that plan last night. Quote, do not open until you get this under control. What does that mean? According to Joe Biden, that's what the public health experts are saying. These are the same public health experts who say you can't go outside unless, of course, it's to attend a BLM rally or loot a Wendy's. But you must listen to them. These are the same people who told you that the riots were, in fact, not a threat to public health. They were necessary. But any demonstration against the lockdowns was a threat to public health. These are supposed to be nonpartisan institutions. Our public health infrastructure is supposed to be nonpartisan. It's become completely corrupted by partisan interests, obviously. And it's making decent people cynical. The people in charge, once again, have revealed themselves to be completely unserious. And yet they still demand that we pay attention to them. That was the theme of the night. It's the theme of the age. It was never more obvious than when Donald Trump brought up Hunter Biden's laptop and the documents on it, the ones that talk about his business dealings with foreign countries and that mention his father. A lot of it's emerged over the last week, and Trump alluded to it last night. Watch this.
And
If
then we're
this
going to have
stuff
follow-up
is true
questions.
about Russia, Ukraine, China, other countries, Iraq, if this is true, then he's a corrupt politician.
All right.
So don't give me the stuff about how you're this innocent baby. Joe, they're calling you a corrupt politician.
Nobody-
Take a look
President
at the
Trump, I
laptop
want to
from
stay
hell.
on the issue of
Excuse me,
race. We're
take a look
talking
at
about the issue.
laptop from hell.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the five former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
And
You
that's
gotta be-
exactly what-
Is this
that's
where you're
exactly
going?
what
This
was
is
told.
where he's going. The laptop is Russia,
Yes.
Gentlemen,
Russia.
I want to stay on the issue of race.
You
okay?
have to be kidding. Here we
Mr.
go
President,
again with Russia.
So a bunch of retired spies, not one of whom has seen the laptop or been able to assess its contents, have suggested in public recklessly and for partisan reasons that this is part of a Russian disinformation campaign. Now Joe Biden himself uses that claim made on his behalf, again on the basis of no evidence, to bat down the question. If you're a little paranoid about maybe the CIA interfering in domestic politics, you just got a lot more paranoid, and for good reason, because they are. Meanwhile, no one in the Biden campaign has denied the authenticity of a single document because they know it's real. And there's overwhelming evidence that it's real. Hunter Biden's lawyer asked for the laptop back, and then Hunter Biden signed it over to the computer repair shop owner. There's now an on-the-record witness who was on many of the email and text message threads involving Hunter Biden confirming that it's all authentic. He just turned his phones over to federal investigators. Is he part of the Russian plot too? This is insane. But forget all that. Russia did it. Russia! The nation you are required to hate for reasons we can't explain but that are critical to our national security. Russia! They're bad! Why do they think they're bad, by the way? Worth thinking about. But don't think about it. Listen to the CIA, America. No more attention to details. Just vote for us. It'll all be better soon.